Welcome, everybody. My name is Walt Marlowe. I'm the Executive Director of the Water Environment Federation. I'm glad you have a chance to join us today in the third of our series of business roundtables. We're trying to bring you some insight from leaders in our profession who are seeing the impacts of the coronavirus and are here to share some of their insights and some of the experiences of what their businesses are dealing with today. So today we're lucky to have four distinguished panelists with us. The first is Joone Lopez. She's General Manager of the Moulton Niguel Water District, which provides water, wastewater, and recycled water services to more than 170,000 customers in 6 cities in South Orange County, California. Before joining Moulton Niguel, she served as the General Manager of the Calaveras County Water District, also located in California. Joone's interesting because, you know, over the last month, we've been talking about the value of water professionals as first responders and critical, but Joone was also a police officer for the city of Pasadena, where she received the Silver Medal of Courage for valor under fire. So welcome, Joone.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Our next panelist is Kevin Schafer. Kevin serves as the Executive Director of the Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewerage District. MMSD is a regional government agency that provides water reclamation and flood management services for about 1.1 million customers in 28 communities in the greater Milwaukee area. The district serves 411 square miles that cover all or segments of 6 watersheds. Boy, having trouble there. So thanks, Kevin.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Our next panelist is Sharon Peters. And Sharon's the president of EMA, a management consulting technology services and engineering company founded in 1975 and focusing exclusively on the water sector. So prior to joining EMA, Sharon worked in water treatment, transmission operations management, and engineering for large regional wastewater and water utilities serving over 2.4 million people. So welcome, Sharon.
Thank you so much. I'm very pleased to be here.
And rounding out our panel today is Iver Skavdal. If I said that close to right, Iver. And he's the Executive General Manager of GHD's U.S. business. GHD provides sustainable water solutions covering every element of the water cycle for urban, rural, and industrial water applications. So Iver's been in the industry for more than 40 years in a variety of roles, starting in a small business in a rural Northern California and growing that throughout the West Coast and merging with GHD nearly 10 years ago. So welcome, Iver.
Thank you, Walt.
So I'll jump right in with a question. You know, how is the coronavirus been affecting your business? And Iver, I'll jump right in with you.
All right. Well, like all of us, it's been pretty dramatic from the first perspective of just relocating our business to the home environment. So like all of you, we had to within a matter of days across the country shift our business from an in-office to at home. And as a provider of engineering, environmental services, and planning and construction documents, a lot of that requires pretty heavy computational capabilities, bandwidth, and servers. So we had to quickly increase that capacity, which we were able to remarkably do in a matter of days. So again, amazing how agile we can be when we need to be in this industry, and it was good to see. With respect to the water business, the change has been remarkably small, little impact for us. Most of our clients have been deemed as providing essential services, and most of our work in both design and on the construction side has continued, and we're able to continue to support that. So some increased focus obviously on safety, particularly on our field sites, and how our people are accessing sites, and how we're doing our work in the field, and leveraging some of our digital tools to help with that. And I think will be more increased focus on even safety and design, on how our construction work is going to be staged in the future, and how people are going to work together out in the field to protect each other, protect the community, as our industry moves forward.
Good insight.
Thank you.
Joone, how do you see your utility being affected right away?
What's definitely changed how we think and how we do business, and I think that's true for the industry. So for our focus of our operation, it's really about critical service, the regular repair work and things that we regularly have scheduled for our capital improvement projects. All those have to be reevaluated. Now that we have people at homes, we can't have them without water. So focusing on the critical work, but knowing that deferred work also comes at a cost, but we had to definitely reevaluate all of our work. And the way that we focus on our communication, we do quite a bit of communication. We have a lot of offerings or programs for our customers. But during this time, we thought it was really important to first focus on safety. So making sure that they understand our water is safe and reliable, because there's a lot of concerns. People are going out and buying bottled water. So we want to assure them. We also want to assure them we're accessible, and online methods to communicate with us was strongly encouraged. And we've seen that improve. And also what not to do, which is what not to flush down the toilet, because the wastewater service is important. So we really honed in our communication and really focused how we think, how we communicate, and also how we engage with the public. Our board meetings, we can't have those meetings anymore. So in terms of transparency, utilization of technology, all those things that we've used somewhat, now we're using quite a bit. And that's always a big lesson. Organizationally, our culture is very strong. We have a very close-knit group of people. We have 160 employees, but now they're all spread out and disconnected. So it's important to recognize the organizational impact of having such a modified work schedule and making sure while they are safe that we still feel connected as a unit, as a team. And so we've had to do some virtual things and do additional creative actions to make everyone feel connected while they're apart. So it's definitely impacted us, but fortunately through prepared mindset and work that we've done, we are going through this well, but certainly a lot of lessons for the future.
Kevin, I bet, also operating a utility, you've probably seen some of those things that Joone mentioned, but what other impacts might have you noticed?
Yeah, very similar to Joone. We were fortunate that we had a business continuity plan in place when this happened. So switching over from working in the office to working at home was basically like flipping a switch. I put out the call and everyone stayed home and started doing their work. One of the things we decided on early on was we were going to keep the construction program going and the maintenance program going. So we've had active construction throughout this period. One of the concerns that we were early on had was the supply chain, trying to get materials to the plants to be able to treat water, the wastewater, the way we do. So we had to adjust some of our delivery schedules because we wanted to be more up to date with chemicals and other materials, so that we had a good backlog just in case the supply chain broke down. Fortunately, we've not seen that. But it's those things that where you have a certain procedure in place, you just have to reevaluate everything and just look at how you do business. And the number one concern and focus, as Joone said, is the public health of your constituents, but also your employees. And just dealing with how different people handle stress. I've got 300 people or so that report to me, and everyone handles this stress level differently. So trying to be able to level that out and treat everyone with respect and kindness and understanding. But it's really a lesson in leadership and management.
Excellent. Sharon, how about your experience at EMA so far?
Well, I guess it's a little bit like what Iver said. It's probably less of an impact on our business than we originally thought it might be. And boy, I wish we'd had that business continuity plan, Kevin, so that we could have just flipped the switch. We were, prior to this, about a third of our people worked in home offices, so it was more a question of moving the other 2/3 into kind of the same mode. And because we're a relatively small company and we're spread out all across the US and Canada, we were already doing a lot of our internal communications through this kind of a virtual mechanism. So those kinds of things were familiar. For the most part, we had equipment. One of the things that I wanted to highlight was for our clients, I was really amazed how many utilities threw themselves into carrying forward with projects that they had underway, despite the fact that their overall focus was shifting, as Joone and Kevin have talked about, to customer safety and critical infrastructure. And we really found with a lot of the project managers and project teams that we were working with, they weren't necessarily those frontline people. And so they really wanted to make a valuable contribution and to kind of keep things going. And we actually found that some of our client project managers wanted to accelerate schedules and have us moving faster and working more quickly because they were getting engaged in fewer things. They had more of a focus on, let's make some progress here. So it's been really good so far.
Excellent. Each of you touched on communication, and communication obviously has become super essential during this pandemic. So I wanted to ask you, how have your organizations adapted your communications to ensure, the ability to achieve your goals and keep your customers and staff employed? Joone, you want to start us off?
Sure. Communication is so important and at every level. And I'll start internally, speaking with our board of directors, who are publicly elected, making sure that there's communication within the organization with all the employees. So we made sure that everyone knew what was going on. At the outset, before the stay-home orders went into effect, we wanted to assure the employees that their safety and that of our customers is paramount. And so we did very frequent communication. So it wasn't a surprise when we had to modify work schedule or telecommute or put other measures into place, and making sure the board was always on top of it. As a matter of fact, every day since March 18, my management and I team, we talk every day, and we talk with our board officers at least once a week. So having that communication internally is important because that really affects what we tell the outside stakeholders. Our communication with customers, again, we were fortunate to have a lot of these online customer portal, and we were able to have our IT system routed to where people could even take calls from home. And so from accessibility, it was really important that we kept those lines of channels of communications open. But we were also very clear with our customers what we're doing, the safety, but making sure that those messages were very focused. And we utilized email, which we saw the highest open rate, our social media, and phone calls and written communication, so that depending on how customers like to receive information, they knew that our operation was strong and that we are going to work with them. So that having that frequent communication and ability for customers to talk to us, really, even though we closed our door to the public, we never actually closed. We kept everything going. Then we worked with our city officials and their staff to let them know what we're doing so we can coordinate, because sometimes when cities stop their processes, that affects our construction or other aspects of our operations. So we want to make sure we were in close coordination and that we understood what each other was doing. Then, of course, with legislators, we wanted to make sure that opportunities for any kind of recovery, funding opportunity, that they realize that as there's a lot of competing interests, that we didn't lose sight of the importance of water and some of the things that we need to think about even into the future as we prepare for prolonged events like this pandemic or its return, hopefully not in a worse way, but we certainly need to anticipate that, and other events that could compound the severity of what we're going through. And so these types of communication, but a very focused communication, has been our approach, and it's been received very well, and everyone knows what's happening, and it helps to alleviate some of the angst, especially during these types of crises.
Oh, thanks. Kevin, what do you see in Milwaukee?
Very similar to Joone. I should just say ditto everything she just said. But we have gone through the same steps she's gone through. And what we found is during a crisis like this, there's a lot of misinformation that people can gather off of the internet and so forth. So we've been able to make very targeted messages that we put out on social media. And it's really helped to address a lot of concerns that we've seen arise, and then, you know, that we've calmed down. It really has been something that we've aggressively tried to go forward with, because that same social media that's working for the external stakeholders also works for my staff as well. I did a daily email to all of my staff from the very beginning, just letting them know the different steps that we were taking to, number one, protect them. Now we've evolved to a position where we're having emails talking about what we're doing within our facilities to make it safe for them to come back to work when we make that decision. So that's the back to work, back to office approach that we're working on right now is one of the probably the most stressful for staff, because as I said earlier, some people respond differently to it. So trying to make sure that people feel safe and comfortable when we do decide to have people come back to work will be a big issue for us. But using social media has been a really good outlet for us to get the messaging out that we need to have. And, you know, we're talking about flushables, we're talking about disinfecting our effluents, that it's working to kill these viruses, just trying to repeat those messages that we've seen from WEF and from CDC and others that have provided good guidance to the public. So it's just an ongoing, continuous, repetitive approach that you have to take with something like this.
No, thanks. Sharon, how have you adapted EMD's communications?
Yeah, so I guess I would say in three different ways. First of all, we're doing a lot more communicating around some of the same topics that Kevin and Joone talked about, which wouldn't necessarily have been our norm before. The second thing really is that I think we've adapted our communication to have a lot more emphasis on, both internally and externally, to have a lot more emphasis on empathy and connectedness. We found that, you know, we really are spending a lot more time asking people how they are and really listening to the answer. And then that tends to take the conversation maybe in a different place into a different place than we were really thinking when we got started. For our clients and our interactions with our clients, we've really tried to focus on kind of building on the relationships that we already had and making sure that we were checking in on what they need, but we were also checking in on their, you know, capacity to deal with us and our topics. And if now wasn't a good time, now wasn't a good time. And to really focus on that, we found that in some areas we've been able to direct them to, you know, reference materials or even, you know, peer utilities that they could talk to about different challenges that they were having, just because we happen to be working with those other people. So it's definitely brought a different flavor, and it's definitely been a lot more frequent, probably than it would have been in the past. And I just want to plus on what you were talking about, Kevin, in terms of recovery planning. It became really clear early on that we were going to need to be at a place where there was a lot of complexity to manage, and we were going to need to be at a place where all of our employees were engaged in understanding risks and opportunities and safety measures and you know, different policies and practices within the organization to make sure that we were keeping our employees safe and keeping our clients safe.
Excellent. Iver, what have you seen as far as adaptability or changes at GHD?
Listens very similar to the others. I mean, I suppose you can never over communicate, but there are times when we all feel overwhelmed with the amount of communications that are coming out, you know, around this issue, you know, both you know, internally as well as from the media. But it is a daily evolving issue. So, you know, again, we're keeping our staff internally informed through all the channels that we've just discussed. With respect to clients, again, staying very close to clients, and yes, nearly every conversation starts with a wellness check-in. Clients, want to know that, the people on our side are doing okay, and how they're faring. There's a lot of friends across this industry, so a lot of concern and compassion and empathy towards one another, and how we're each doing. So we start our conversation with the clients in the same way. And then it's really, in our business, it's often, you just need to have, more comms around how projects are proceeding and what's going on, because, we're not meeting face to face. So you just need to stay well connected through the whole project cycle. And then also a lot of comms about, what we need to be doing differently in the future, and thinking differently and expanding our conversations into those, new areas and areas of impact about, how project approvals will be achieved, um, how documents can be electronically reviewed, and approved and processed, um, how we can package information for clarity to your boards and committees and public. So all of those comms are important and ongoing, throughout the industry.
Good points. You started to touch, and maybe your comments are a good transition. Our first two comments, questions were, more about how we're reacting immediately. But I'm also curious, where do you all see the industry or your organization going over the next 6 to 12 months? There's a lot of uncertainty there, but would love to hear what your best guesses or plans might be for that. Kevin, how about you in Milwaukee?
Well, the next 6 to 12 months are going to be lonely, because I think we're going to be on calls like this and not face to face. And I do think that impacts people in different ways. We've learned a lot. I mean, so this has been terrible. It's been just a tragedy for the whole world. But we've learned a lot on some of the things that Iver talked about, the procurement issues. How can we go more electronic with our procurement? Some of those internal functions that we maybe weren't making adjustments for before, we can now go internally and do more electronically, and maybe they're more efficient. And so far we've seen that they have been. So I see us in the next 6 to 12 months transitioning back to the office, trying to continue to make the office safer, but then also adopting some of these procedures that we've seen that have worked for us on the whole. We also know that we need to meet our regulatory requirements, of course, but we need to keep in mind our long-term vision for where we want things to go. So we continually look at what's that 20-year plan that we want to meet, and take steps even during these times of crises to meet those future goals. It's you're just adding one more ball to the juggling act that we always do with our efforts to clean water. It's just one more that we have to deal with.
I think you're on mute, Walt.
Oh, geez, thanks for getting me, Joone.
I thought it was
after
just
100 of these, I'm still forgetting to take myself off mute. Sharon, I was asking what's going on at EMA, best guess next 6 to 12 months.
Yeah, so I think more of the same, and trying to put some of the lessons that we've learned over the last few weeks into effect. So we're looking at different kinds of online tools that we can use to do things that are a little more sophisticated around group meetings in this kind of sense, because we see that as being one of the last activities that we'll be able to engage in face to face. And just those sessions around visioning, and sessions around trying to hammer out difficult issues around some of the technology tools that we use, I think is going to, we're going to have to keep working on that. with the IT systems, we're finding that we've been able to be more successful than we thought possible in terms of doing and validating testing of systems and also user training. So again, we want to up our skills and ability levels to try and accommodate those kinds of things, because we see that as something that there's going to be more of a need for. And the third thing is really around planning. So one of the things that this level of uncertainty has taught us is, don't rely on a long-range plan, whether you're talking about, putting together an overall project plan, or whether you're talking about, a task scope of work. You may need to change that fairly frequently, and to just be adaptive and resilient to changing conditions. So we're really trying to enhance and focus our ability to do those things as well. And I guess the other thing that I would say that we're thinking about a lot is the kinds of projects that we were involved in. It's quite a while ago now, thank goodness, 10 years ago or so, as water and wastewater utilities were coming out of the recession. And we're wondering, we all have those questions about what does our financial future look like? How are our customers going to be able to pay? And what kinds of changes are those? What kind of changes are finance is going to drive in terms of how utilities are operating? And so we've done some internal work kind of thinking back to some of those challenging projects and saying, to what extent are those lessons relevant today, and to what extent are we in a different universe where we're going to need to be thinking differently?
Oh, yeah, interesting stuff. Iver, how much similar or maybe different things do you see in 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, so in the shorter term frame, it's really the strategies to get back together. So as we start seeing the shelter-in-place orders lifted across the country, and we start bringing people back there, working with attorney and also with clients on how we're going to do that. We've developed an app that we're using to help clients track movement, and also integrate people back into the buildings. We have a company actually that's part of GHD's called Move Strategies that helps, and we first deployed it with some of our large manufacturing clients. So mostly in the automotive industry, as they're bringing people back into the plant, right? How do they start up? How do they maintain distances? How do they protect their workers? So we're helping clients in that regard, and we expect to see more and more of that type of application, going forward. In the longer term, the fundamental challenges in the water industry haven't really changed. So, we still have, the challenges of water supply and clean water and climate change and all the other impacts to the industry. It's just we can't continue to delay response to those issues, right? So we'll get back to business, but it's going to be, business is going to be done a little bit differently. And then again, we're going to have to manage through, the agile future, as people have discussed, and how we're going to address those challenges and make the change and the transition. I think we also, in this industry, should be prepared and preparing our districts and our projects for maybe another wave of stimulus funding. So, hopefully that funding will come through. That'll help the construction and help some of the aging infrastructure, on the water side, and also clean water supply. So, encouraging clients is to keep an eye on that horizon, and to stay focused on someone just has to continue as usual in spite of these, current challenges.
Yeah, certainly there are not only those 6 to 12, but like you hit on, some very long-term challenges for us as a country to really commit to upgrading our infrastructure. Joone, you're in California, maybe you have a different experience. California was kind of at the lead of experiencing some of this crisis. You may be further down the road than some of the other areas. So your 6 to 12 months may be a little bit different, but what do you see coming up?
Yeah, all the points that have been raised so far, the other panelists absolutely agree with them. Really, the focus is going to be 3 areas: safety, preparedness, and improvement. As we have employees re-enter the work site, what can we do to make sure that it's safe? So disinfection at a different level, not just janitorial service, and making sure that we do a very thorough job, including our vehicles, which is work site for most of our employees. And also making sure that we have social distancing practices in order to make sure, as we have interface with members of the public, consultants, contractors, that we can ensure safety. And also looking at policies like travel policy, these types of things that's part of our business, that's important for relationship building. We have to put some measures in and figure out what changes we need to make. We have been documenting all of our actions during this crisis, and we're building off of that to be better prepared going forward. Because I think as an industry, we certainly could have been better prepared. And I'll certainly speak for our agency. This was not one of those scenarios that we did a tabletop exercise. We always do earthquake, flood, fire, and those types of things. And this completely turned the emergency response plan on its head, because how we typically respond to emergency is so different with this pandemic. And it taught us a lot. So making sure that we have a much more comprehensive emergency preparedness plan going forward. And we are also, not that I'm a pessimist, but we're expecting this condition to prolong, even though in California, things are starting to reopen, but there is every indication that come fall time with a change of weather that we could go right back to where we are. And as I mentioned earlier, my biggest concern has been a compounding event on top of this, whether it's a natural disaster or cybersecurity issue, how can we weather through that? And so our plan going forward will contemplate even a worst case scenario. And also looking at technology, because there are some limitations to some of these platforms, and certainly the equipments that are needed to make sure that our employees can function at this level. We need to do more in terms of that investment, expansion of technology. And as we see sort of the economic impact of the COVID experience, the real impact, I don't think we even know at this point. We see record number in unemployment. What does that mean in terms of our ability to raise or adjust our rates? And as state is experiencing this deficit, and so are our cities, what's going to happen, things like property tax. And so there's a lot of unanswered questions, and we're trying to relook at our finances to make sure that we have been very resilient and strong, but what can we do better, more of, differently, to even weather through some of these economic conditions that we have to plan out some scenarios, the worst case scenarios.
Well, you mentioned if another event happens on this, boy, I think at WEF, I think we need to update our risk registers to take that into account. I don't think we have a second event on top of this. Boy, as you said that, thinking the internet going down made me shudder. So I hope that's not in our future.
Yeah, about a month ago, there was a little shaker down here in California, and that was one of my fears. I remember sitting in my room going, oh no, here's that compounding event. Luckily, it wasn't a big shaker, but yeah, and we've also known that there's been breach in payroll systems, cybersecurity. As people are hurting for money, you can have things like that.
Yeah, wow. Well, thank you all. This has been some amazing insight into what's going on, for our viewers today. The water community is incredibly passionate. There's an amazing amount of expertise in it, and I thank you for your willingness to share it. Kind of as a wrap up, I'll just go around one time, kind of a free-for-all round. But any final thoughts that you might have on our current situation? Sharon, let me start with you.
Okay. I want to just build on 2 things that I've heard from my colleagues here during this conversation. And the first one is about the human side, the stress levels that are going on. We don't always know what our employees and the general public and the other people that we deal with on a day-to-day basis, what all they're going through. And I think just being aware of that and maybe taking a few extra breaths when we hear things and saying, you know, is that what they really believe, or is that partly the stress of the pandemic talking? And I think the second thing I would say, last thing I would say, is just that, you know, it really does feel like things are going to continue to change. They're going to continue to evolve. The more sort of calmly and thoughtfully we can work through those things, and the more we can help each other through venues like this and through sharing the stories of what's worked for us, I think the better we're going to be able to weather all of those uncertainties.
Thanks. Iver, how about your wrap-up thoughts?
Yeah, well, I appreciate, first of all, having the opportunity to, you know, to share these thoughts with this group. Listen, I think we're gonna, as people said, that we're gonna continue to have to be, you know, very agile. I think, you know, in the U.S., you know, people have come to rely on this industry as being, you know, a trusted industry, you know, a stable industry, you know, and one that they can count on. So I think, you know, we have the challenge, as somebody said, you know, what if there's a second event? I think we have the challenge always to be prepared, to stay together, which I think this industry does a fabulous job in bringing this type of nation, and to move all, you know, with diligently to, you know, to adapt to the current situation. And frankly, I'm proud of the people.
Iver,
Confident that we'll
I hope that's just me that is not hearing you. Your mic seems to be breaking up a little.
Okay, my apologies. Yeah, I looks like I'm having some technology issues.
Okay, all right. Let me, we'll come back to you, but let's see if Joone has any last comments there.
Sure. I think this pandemic has tested our resiliency as an agency as well as the industry. And I've always believed in sort of 4 key pillars that I think puts us in a good position. And that's your people, your workforce, and your finance, the relationships that you have, and the trust that you built over the years. And having a workforce that has a culture of commitment to public service. So during these times, they are still focused on what we need to do and going the extra mile to make sure that we provide that critical service. Making sure that we have the finances in place and being able to plan out different scenarios where we need to maybe relook at how we typically do things, and is reserves enough? Is rate structure enough? What other mechanism do we need to think about, and what kind of planning do we need to do? And the relationship that we have with various stakeholders, from the legislators to other agencies, I think that's so critical, because as we move from this to be better prepared, we need to engage them and take these lessons learned so that we could be better in the future and be able to survive better. And last but not least is trust with the public, because when these things happen, they need to be able to trust you, and that way we can come out of this closer and stronger in our relationship, and making sure that we put a lot of emphasis on building on that trust for the future.
Oh, great. Kevin, last thoughts from Milwaukee.
Sure. And again, thank you for having me be part of this panel. You know, I'm very optimistic about the water industry. I do think that we are one of the anchor institutions in the municipalities that we serve. So it will be looked to as part of the solution. If we can do more construction, if we can employ people more, you need to look at the impacts of the virus it's had on some of the lower income areas of our municipalities, some of the more diverse neighborhoods, and try to make sure that we keep them in mind as we're trying to improve everyone's life, and to try to make sure that we employ more people to try to get them back to work. So I'm optimistic about the water industry. I think that we are a leader and we can continue to lead, but we need to keep that future thought in place, move things forward, and just remember that what we do impacts everyone.
I think those are great last thoughts, and I hope they resonate with our viewing audience today. Again, I want to thank you all for participating. It's great to see you as leaders in the profession, and your willingness to share your experiences certainly reflects some of your comments that we're all in this together as an industry, and we're certainly going to emerge stronger after this as an industry, because the need for clean water and protecting the public health is certainly not going away. So I encourage our viewers, hope you've enjoyed today. Continue to visit the WEF.org website and look for our Corona resources page. We'll continue to post on almost a daily basis information to help all of us weather this crisis together. So thanks, and look forward to seeing you at another business roundtable coming up soon.